Thank you, Nicole. I'm gonna sit. It's gonna be a long day. I might stand up a few times, but whenever I get started, my heart rate is always like super high, so I get out of breath really quick. It'll pass in like 5 minutes. But one thing I want to talk about real quick is me and Nicole met probably a year ago, and like educating real estate was something that like was always something that I wanted to do. I started investing and I started GCing about 4 years ago, and I found myself like having zero resources to teach myself how to manage my rehabs. And I brought on a partner at that time who was a GC and who was an investor, and I would like take notes. So like the very first thing is like demo, and like I had no idea like what the order of a rehab was, like how to manage a job site, and like there was literally no resources for me to learn how to do that except experiencing it. So a lot of the things I'm going to teach you today and within the next few weeks actually come from direct experience, from a lot of very, very expensive mistakes that I'm going to save you guys from doing. And yeah, I just think it's super important that this stuff is learned before you get started, because it ends up saving you thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars. So we're gonna get started with the content right away. So things that we're gonna talk about today specifically is project management. So how many people have already done a real estate investment deal, a rehab, a new construction, some kind of build? Cool, a lot of us, that's amazing. So one thing that's going to be like the most important thing as an investor, whether you're on the job site GCing or you're just managing the managers, is the processes and the things that go into it, so that like you can't manage something that you don't know anything about. And part of being an investor and part of like managing is twofold. So it's the project management skills that are needed in real estate investing, and also the leadership skills that are needed to be a good project manager, which are two completely separate things, and we're going to go over that later to make sure that like we're that full circle investor. So of the project management skills needed, we're going to start with how important organization is. And if I need to slow down or pause, or you guys want to take pictures or ask questions, just let me know. Sometimes I can talk fast. I'm definitely willing to slow down or pause when needed. So we'll go over the 6 real quick. So the first is organization. The second is communication. The third is problem solving and critical thinking. The fourth is negotiation and cost control. The fifth is quality management and leadership, or quality management, and the sixth is leadership. So organization, good order is the foundation of all things. So everything we're gonna learn today is the foundation of the rest of our careers. So these are the things that in order to be successful and in order to have good projects going, these are the things that we need to build upon. Without the stuff we learned today, everything else is gonna be useless. There's a lot of stuff. So like I said, if we need to pause, just let me know. So organization. So the first thing is defining roles within the business, within your projects. So there's a few different types of roles. 1 is customers, 2 is partners, and 3 are employees. So you always kind of want to have an idea of who it is that you're working with and have the basis of that relationship down. So customers, in this instance, if we're doing a rehab, we're building a house, we're building an apartment complex, our customers are 2 people. It's either the end buyer or seller or our tenants. Then there's our partners. So a partner is someone who works with you towards your goal, not an employee that reports to you. So a partner can be subcontractors, it can be agents, it can be your business partner, even your marketing person. So a big thing to learn or to know in business is that like almost everyone that you come across in your day-to-day is a partner. They need you as much as you need them. You're working towards a common goal, and like we need to erase that idea of like being, a boss, like having that boss employee like dynamic, because it hinders our success to reaching that goal. So a subcontractor is not your employee, they're your contractor, they're your partner. over time, you're working towards that shared goal. So an employee is actually someone that we don't really come across too much in this business. It's someone who gets a W-2. You know, like we typically are working with subcontractors, with GCs, and the like. So typically, depending on how you structure your business, we don't really have employees. So we came up with 5 rules to being an organized project manager. So rule 1 is the scope of work. So before you get involved in any project, the very first thing that we do in regards to moving forward with construction is creating a scope of work. So this is important, one, to refer to throughout the entire project, and it also sets a timeline of responsibilities. So later in the class, we're going to go in depth about a scope of work, but it's good to know the importance now of what the scope of work stands for. Yeah, so we'll just leave it at that. So 2 is stick to the script. So what that means is, you know, from this scope of work, we have an itemized list of everything that needs to be done in this project. So it's like, okay, what's next? What am I doing right now? Am I ahead of the game? We have a timeline of the project, scheduling your subs accordingly. So like we're gonna really dig deep into this stuff later, but what that means is like most subcontractors, most contractors average 2 weeks lead time. So what that means if your installation is getting installed and you have inspection scheduled for Monday, you don't want to wait till that's done to call your drywall company, because they might be 2 weeks out, which is really average in the business. So it's kind of like, hey, just a heads up, we're 2 weeks out from drywall, can I get on your schedule? And then maybe sending like a follow-up a week before, a few days before, giving them an update if any timeline has changed. And that's big with like building relationships with your contractor, because we have to think in terms of how everyone else is running a business as well. So imagine if someone scheduled you to do something, you have employees, you have bills to pay, you have a timeline of things, and then they're like, oh, you know what, I'm not ready today, can you come next week? Like, you're affecting their money, you're affecting their schedule, and it's like that's something to consider in order to build healthy relationships too. And ordering materials at the right time. So again, like a lot of things have lead times. Kitchens, depending on like the color of the cabinets, could be up to a few weeks. Windows could be up to a month or more. So it's a matter of knowing that timeline, taking notes, where am I at, what's next, what's ahead, and keeping to that, which comes to the next rule, is your project should never be vacant. So my very first project, I had no idea that there were lead times to things. So what that looked like is I would finish my framing, measure the windows, and then be told that the windows were 3 weeks out. So then my project sat vacant for 3 weeks. That is interest paid for me and my loans. That is me not getting my house on the market as fast as it should be. It's affecting my timeline. It's affecting everything. So like this is important for a few different reasons. One, you want to keep your project moving, and 2, people are watching. So if your house is vacant, your building is vacant, there's people taking note of that. And then we come into the issues of burglary and vandalism. So it's like being one step ahead of the game to avoid the project sitting vacant, which of course ties back into that timeline and scope of work. So rule number 4, like I always think back, so I do not come from, you know, a family of money. I don't come from a family of real estate. But my grandfather, I found out, had invested in real estate. I was never passed down any of that education. It was kind of like, oh, it's in my blood. Maybe that's where that comes from. And I think back to okay, so he was doing real estate in the 50s, the 60s, right? They did not have any of the technology that we have today. The way these projects go, the way my business goes, it's like I'm texting, I'm emailing, I'm sending PDFs, I'm signing contracts. It's like boom, 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 using my phone all day, using the computer all day. And I just can't imagine running a business without these resources, which comes to the idea of okay, we have no excuse as to why we can't do this. If people were doing this with none of the resources that we have today. So take advantage of these things that are available to us. So I am like a very basic person when it comes to technology. I like lists, I can do emails, I like text messages. I don't really use too many of like the apps. There's Buildertrend, there's Monday, which are very like, okay, keeping everything updated electronically. Buildertrend is a very advanced app that one of the developers that I worked for used, and it kept track of all the contractors, the timeline. It would send alerts. It would have you check off things as they were done, which is an amazing resource if that's something that like you can work well with. But punch lists are a big part of this business. It's constantly like referring back to the things that were done, where am I at, working backwards. And I use my phone, the Notes app on my iPhone. It's just like making lists. There is an app called Wunderlist, which is really helpful because you can make like if I make a punch list per se, then it's like, okay, I can separate it by trade. So there's the plumber's punch list, the electrician's punch list, the HVAC's punch list, and then I can check things off as they're completed. I also am really big on photos, so I use Google Drive and Dropbox. So throughout the project, I document everything by photos. So we'll go over this more later in the class, but one thing, it's like, anytime a phase of the project progresses, I go in and I take pictures of every wall of like, everything that was done. So later, if there's any issues, the walls are closed up, I can refer back to these photos. This is where the plumbing lines were, this is where the electrical lines were. If there's any HVAC issues, hey, like there was ducts there, did any of them get covered up by drywall? And it's just like really simple things like that like one photo can save you hundreds and thousands of dollars by just like, avoiding cutting something up or identifying a leak. So that's another really good advantage of technology. Rule number 5 is managing your team. So with collaborating and coordinating subcontractors to work together and prepare for the next person. So we want to do, one thing, it's like these contractors come into your job site and each of them have a very specific role. So like your electrician is going in and they're doing the electrical work. So like they're not thinking about the plumber. They're not thinking about like the sprinkler guy who's coming in. So that's important because when we're doing our rough-ins, some things like coincide with each other. So like, the lights might need to be in a particular location because there is now ductwork running along the wall, which affects the ceiling width, and things like that. So what we do, what's really important, so like if you are managing your job site and your subcontractors, even if you're not, it's good to be on site just to make sure everything's going according to plan, is I do at least three walkthroughs with every single contractor. So every time I hire the electrician, who like I use the same one every time now, he knows like what I like, we do a quick walkthrough through the entire building. He's like, this is where the light switches are going, this is where everything's going. We get on the same page about what to expect. I pop in maybe like halfway through towards the end of when they're finishing up, and I make sure everything is done as was agreed to. And I catch it then because they're working. I can say, hey, like this needs to be changed. They can change it real quick. And then that third walkthrough is definitely before they are paid. So you want to do that final walkthrough. Everything's 100%. If possible, then like you're making sure everything is working accordingly. With let's see, like electrical. So one thing, I have a project that I'm finishing up now, and it's like I do my final walkthrough, and I'm like making sure the light switches aren't reversed, and I'm making sure all the receptacles are working, and all of the stuff that's gonna like end up tying up my project. I make sure that at that walkthrough, we try to take care of as much things as possible. So this one is probably one of the most important, and it's time management. So we talked about that in the beginning. So like a new construction project, if organized well, we can knock it out in 4 months. But there is times where a new construction project takes up to a year because we maybe don't have the experience, we don't know the timelines and the lead times. So once we have that, then we were able to manage our time efficiently. So the ability to manage time and prioritize tasks is an essential characteristic of efficient project managers. Workers may respond better to managers who are able to stay on task, avoid procrastination, and complete work on time. In addition to personal time management, project managers must be able to maximize productivity and minimize distractions in several key project areas. It is also important for project managers to avoid the temptation of managing too much. Good managers can adapt to changes in the project and develop the trust between team members rather than micromanage. So this kind of goes back to, staying organized and communicating with your subcontractors, showing up and sticking to your word, because sometimes it's like, oh, the toilet came broken, we need a new toilet. Okay, so like this is something, time is of the essence. Like time is of the essence is a big one in this business because we need to order things on time. Everything has, like every cause has an effect. And it's like, okay, be solution oriented, like boom, okay, something's broken, I need to fix it. Something's missing, I need to order it. Someone didn't do something, I need to call them right away and get them back here to make sure it's done. So a little bit more about organization. So keep the job site clean. So every subcontractor should leave this job site how they found it. And you can promote this by having trash bags and a trash can on site. So this is one of like the most important things for me in my business, for a few different reasons. So having a clean job site, number one, it's like a safety thing. So like you personally, you don't want to walk into a job site and have like tripping hazards. You don't want, your contractors to be, working in a messy site and having, injuries because of that as well. So I always set the expectation up front of like, I'm giving you a clean job site, leave with a clean job site. And I always, I'll walk in when they're working and be like, hey, I brought some trash bags. Hint, hint, use them, thank you. And if they don't, then I make sure to follow up and be like, hey, like, can you please like come back and clean up the mess? And like typically they don't have to leave with their trash. Certain contractors, it is expected that they leave with their trash, like drywall. I'll make sure that's included, that they're hauling out all the extra drywall. But plumbers and electricians, it's a lot of just little trash, cut pipes, all the electrical wire, boxes and trash and wrappers. And it takes just a few minutes to sweep up. You can even leave a broom on site if that helps promote that. So setting routines and securing your job site at the end of each day. So this comes down to, even if you are hiring a manager, it's like, it's your building, it's your project. There is a certain level of initiative that we need to take, even if we're not involved in the daily operations. So something as simple as going to the job site at the end of the day. Are the windows locked? Are the lights off? Is the door locked? The keys in the lockbox with the lockbox scrambled? Because sometimes it's like, a contractor will put the keys in the lockbox and then just leave the code there. So like a passerby can be like, ooh, and then, your job site is accessible to anybody. And, that's a big problem in Philly is vandalism and burglary. So something that simple of, taking 5 minutes, keeping lights off, doors locked. And if there is an alarm, making sure the alarm's set. So I personally use SimpliSafe, so I threw that in there. I don't work for SimpliSafe, I'm not promoting them in any way, but I have a SimpliSafe alarm on every job site, and I have the app on my phone. So sometimes it's like, okay, before I go to bed, I can just make sure all the alarms are set real quick. And if there's ever any kind of entry, I get an alert right away. So it's not like I'm waking up in the middle of the night and be like, oh my God, someone might be breaking in. Like I know if there's any kind of entry, and then the police show up right away. Organizing and securing uninstalled materials. So one thing that I do, I've kind of been like shifting to a lot of my finishes I buy online. So as I get deliveries in, I'll find like a closet in the job site and I'll put everything in the job site and I'll label all the boxes what they're for. And that's really important to like either not bring them to the job site too early or organizing them and hiding them away, because uninstalled materials grow legs. They go missing all of the time. So we are moving on to communication. The art of communication is the language of leadership. So here are 10 tips for communication. So we want to identify the best way to communicate with our partners, our contractors, our investors, everyone that we deal with, because not everyone is the same. So me personally, my preferred method is always text message, and I always let everybody know. I can get it right away, and I can answer it when I'm available. I'm like always on the go. Emails don't come in right away for me, so it's like, all right, I can like keep track of everything right away. But like there's some people that just like don't text, so like that has to be established. So like my roofer just does not text. I text him and he calls me every single time. And like that's just something that I need to get used to, because if I need something done, if something's important that needs to be talked about, I know I have to pick up the phone and call them. And it's just like that dynamic of who you're working with and what they need. Some people are like strictly email, more of like the administrative people. I threw an Instagram DM because I have found a lot of my subcontractors on Instagram. So it's like that. If I like Instagram because like you can see some of their work, you can see who follows them, you can reach out, be like, hey, have you used them? I see you're connected with these people, and then I just send them a message. Hey, I see you install garage doors. I need a garage door, and that opens up that line of communication. So setting expectations. So this again kind of goes back to those 3 walkthroughs that you have with all of your contractors. So the very first walkthrough is where you're setting your expectations. So one, it's like you go over exactly any custom designs or requests that you have, and you make sure that you communicate that well so that they know what they have to do. The clean job sites is a big one. So like if they show up and you're like, hey, my expectation is for you to leave this job site the way that you found it. That's not everybody's expectation, right? So some contractors can feel free to come in and go and then just like get paid and run to the next job. And it's like, that's not how I work. I need you to have just a little bit more care in the job site and making sure that they understand what that means. So following up, so this is a big one. So you have to get comfortable with following up. We're all very busy people. The subcontractor may not be great at communicating in general, but that doesn't make them, a bad subcontractor. So you may have to overcompensate, which means like, they may be super busy, and it's like, hey, can you come check out this job? And then I wait a day, and it's like, hey, did you ever get a chance to check out that job? And if I just kind of like plant the seed and leave and like just hope that they're going to take care of, they're going to come check out the job whenever it's convenient for them. It might be a week, it may be 2 weeks, they may forget. So it's like, okay, thank you. And then the next day, or if they say like, oh, I'll come tomorrow, then the next day you're like, hey, did you get a chance to go? And like kind of staying on top of your contractors, everyone involved in the entire project in terms of like, if you're purchasing the project, and staying on top of investors and lenders and title. And it's just like, hey, did you do that thing? Hey, do you have that thing ready? And that's what's important, to keep everything on time. So the tone of your communication is really important. So this is kind of like I want to say like, you kind of feel it out, using the best tone to communicate with people. So I feel like this is more particular for women. So sometimes it's like, in order for me to get a point across, I have to be a little bit more assertive. I have to be a little bit more loud. I have to, kind of overcompensate and like make sure that they know that, one, I know what I'm talking about, because it's assumed that I don't, and two, that like this needs to get done, and because I like all of the like gender ideas of a woman, like laissez-faire, all these things, like that doesn't work here. Like I'm about my business just like you are. And sometimes like that's not necessary. Sometimes, you don't have to like establish that tone. So keeping all parties informed. So kind of like what we talked about earlier with that timeline. So I'm doing my demo. Demo's due to be completed on Friday. I want to make sure that my masons, if it's a rehab, are lined up for as soon as demo is done. My framers, I want to make sure that they're, that their material is ordered and that everything is staying on time and that everybody is kept in the loop. So don't overshare. Don't overshare is what's essential. You don't have to share information that's not pertinent to that partner or sub. So a good example of this, and this is what made me want to put this in. So I was doing a walkthrough once with an electrician and someone that I had helping me with project management, and we were focusing on electrical, and he is getting off track and like asking questions about stuff that has nothing to do with the electrical. We're just on the job site getting distracted, and I had to remind him to like, all right, bring it back to, we're focusing on electric right now, because then it could get confusing. And this person's like, oh, what? I have to do, and I'm like, no, you don't have to do anything. They're talking about like the kitchen layout. So it's just kind of like keeping things keeping to the script with your contractors. Simply, just listen what these people have to say, So if we hire a roofer, they know a whole lot more about roofs than we do. So it's just like being open to listening what they have to say. Always be respectful, like this, in this business, it's like, this rule doesn't apply to everybody. Not everyone practices this. And I always have to remind myself that like the way other people talk is a reflection of their character, and the way I respond is a reflection of mine. And it's just like, we have, it's a small city. We're all doing the same thing. We want to build a reputation for ourselves. And again, just like, don't be afraid to give orders. We can be diplomatic, make sure that we're setting these expectations, making sure that everybody has a clear understanding of what their job is and what we expect from them. So tip 10 is finding balance. Don't be an ass, but be assertive. So it's kind of like, this is a relationship-based business, right? So like, it is important that we're getting respect as managers and as leaders, but it's also important that we are building a trusting relationship with everyone that we're working with. So like, some of this might sound like kind of common sense, but it's like, this is the foundation of the relationships that take place in the business and on the job site. So we're going to move on to problem solving and critical thinking. There's always more than one way to skin a cat. So 5 rules for problem solving. Okay, so a ton of people in this room have done a rehab before, have got through a job. How many people have done a project and haven't had any problems? Everyone look around. So no matter what, there will be problems throughout your job site and throughout the project. But what the most important thing is how we respond to them. So Nicole said once, it's like, we already are, at the point where we're investing, we already have a project. We're like, most people don't even get that far. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, we're going to come across things that we need to think critically. It's not always going to be fun. It's always going to be worth it. And this particular section of the class is where that we save a lot of money. Because often this is the part of the project that like puts people to the street, like they'll give up, they'll sell the project, they get defeated. But it's like, going into it knowing that like we're gonna have to solve problems already kind of like puts us in a better place for when that comes. So every single problem has a solution. Every single problem has a solution. And sometimes we don't think that that's true when we have a problem in front of us. And it's really important to know that. So like, the thing about, what we do is that like, this is just a like hair of the amount of people that invest in real estate, and we are all gonna share in the problems that we have. So every problem has an unlimited set of solutions. You just have to find the one that works best. I forgot what I was going to say. So being willing to think outside of the box. Like I said, like every project, it's like problem, boom. And like, we have to be solution oriented. That is like key to being able to get through a project, is being solution oriented. It wastes a lot of time, a lot of energy, if we are not willing to jump right to the solution. So like, if we are living in the problem, it is just gonna drain our soul, it's gonna drain our pockets, and we just have to like, all right, problem, we have it. What's the solution? What can we do about it? Because once you have the problem, it's not going to go away. So like wasting the energy on like getting angry and getting frustrated isn't going to serve a purpose. So don't panic. Again, like you can get creative about how to solve your problem. You can't get creative if you're in panic mode. So it's like fight or flight, like sometimes, we come across this problem, it's like, like I can't believe that this happened to me. And it's like, we can just get so tight, about this thing that we're dealing with, but it's not a productive state to be in. And like, I really want to stress this part of the class because again, like we are going to end up in this situation, and the way we respond to it will make or break our deal. So your problem is not new. You are not the first person to have this problem. I absolutely promise. If you come across a problem and that's how you feel, it's not facts. Especially, we all do the same thing. Philadelphia is very typical in the way of our buildings are structured. So if we're doing rehabs, it's like a brick or stone row home that looks just like the one next to it and looks just like the one next to that. And more often than not, the project that I did is very similar to the project that you did. And reaching out to people in your network who have done similar projects may have had that problem before and have a solution that you don't have right now. So don't be embarrassed. The truth is 99% of people never even get this far, so you're already ahead of the game. All right, so this is why most people fail at problem solving. So the first reason is they give up on finding a solution too quickly. So they assign a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Just throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't have a solution to this. Let's just we'll try again on the next one. They under or overestimate what it will take to solve the problem, so kind of like if this is a more expensive fix, so like something that I'm dealing with right now. So I have a new construction project and, I have done probably almost 50 projects in the city, and never once have I ever came across a building having a private sewer. And this building, it goes street to street. There's a street behind the property. The water service is in the front, the sewer is in the back. So for a new construction, it's like you have to hire someone to dig up the street and do the water service. So now I have to have them do that twice. So this is a project that I was expecting a $7,000 cost to do the water service, and now I'm looking at over $14,000, which with the margins that we look at in Philly, that's a really big deal. So my partner was like, oh my God, the project's ruined, And it's like, okay, well, are we gonna let this thing sit for a few months while we act like it's, that it's not gonna cost another $7,000? Are we gonna hire 12 different plumbers to give us the same answer? Or are we just gonna say, okay, 3 different people told us the same thing, we have to bite the bullet, we have to get it done. And it's just moving on, getting to the finish line faster. There's ways to make up for some of that money. And one of them is definitely staying on course. If we lose time over stressing over a problem, time is money. And that's a big one in this business. We are typically using private hard bank money, and money costs money. So if we are held up for weeks, that might cost us $1,000 in just trying to figure something out. So that's a big one. So they panic or stress. That's kind of if having the dynamic of this partner who is just oh my God, and I'm just okay, what are we gonna do about it? Okay, this is the reality of the situation. Next time we know to hire a plumber or to have a plumber come out before we start. So something as simple as before we started the project, having someone identify where the sewer was located would have saved me $7,000, or at least been able to use that in my scope of work and in my budget and account for that accordingly and run numbers for this project so that I knew that I would make money. So the fifth reason is they don't make use of what they do have because they are blinded because of what they don't have. So that's just a symptom of panic, right? We can't think rationally if we're all tight. And sometimes the answer is really simple and it's right there, but we're all tense and we might have to leave the job site and it could be something that's really not that deep. The sixth one is they enter a rehab project with the mindset that they won't encounter problems. So we already established that. Everybody here knows we're gonna have problems. So you will encounter problems on every single job site. So now that we have a problem, here are ways to solve your rehab problems. So the first one is just identifying the issue. What is the problem? Be clear about what the problem is. Remembering that different people might have different views of what the issues are. Separate the listing of issues from the identification of interests. So what that could mean is hiring or having someone who specializes in this problem rather than me. So like an example of that could look like, there's a leak, coming from above a window. So maybe, the person who installed the window, I call them and I say, hey, there's an issue. And like they might know better than I would. Or I hire the roofer and say, hey, there's a leak here. So it's kind of like having, different views of what the issue is and identifying exactly what it is. So understanding everyone's interests, which are the needs that you want satisfied by any given solution. So we often ignore our true interests as we become attached to one particular solution. So like, that's kind of like setting ego aside. Like sometimes I feel like I know the best way and I don't. And I have to remember that like, okay, so I have this idea of like what a solution could be, taking the time to hearing other people out and then identifying in a realistic manner of like, okay, so what is the best way to execute this? So the best solution is one that satisfies everyone's interests. This is the time for active listening. So, hiring a professional or having that, like whatever that issue is on the person who may be directly involved is to kind of hear them out. So now we want to look at the root cause of the problem. So this is important in terms of like not making sure that this does not happen again. So like, for instance, that story I just told you about my current project about how this building has a private sewer. Didn't even know that exists in Philadelphia. So now we all know that exists in Philadelphia and that we can now, because the root cause is this private sewer, I can now, on the next project, hire someone to identify that first. And so it's like making sure it doesn't repeat. So now we want to list the possible solutions. So this is the time to do some brainstorming. There may be lots of room for creativity. Separate the listing of options from the evaluation of the options. One major, this is a fun story. So I had done a basement apartment in Mount Airy, and it was, my partner and I had done this rehab. It was actually a home that he was going to be moving into. It wasn't, we were able to like take the time and like maybe experiment with problem solving. But we all know, like for finishing a basement, there's like a process that goes involved in making sure that it's waterproofed properly. And, typically what that process looks like is we dig the basement, either as far down as the foundation goes, or we do the underpinning, and then we do like a French drain system, which requires like, a trench around the outside of the basement. There's like a dimple mat that goes up the wall and perforated pipe. So that way the water comes through the pipe and it leaves the pipe. So in this situation, the basement was completely finished and it kept flooding every time it rained. And we couldn't figure out why. So we're like, okay, maybe the sump pump isn't working. We replaced the sump pump. Okay, let's figure out, maybe there's something behind the drywall. We open up the drywall and we're checking out the foundation wall. Maybe it's coming in through the wall. And it turns out that the person who installed the French drain system, they didn't use a perforated pipe, they used a hard pipe. So the water was basically coming in through where the sump pump would have been, and it wasn't, the water wasn't leaving where it was supposed to. So here we are with this finished basement. It's got a kitchen, tile floors, drywall trim, and we have to rip out the entire perimeter of the entire basement to lay down this perforated pipe. So it was a matter of breaking up the tile, breaking up the concrete, ripping out the trim, ripping out the kitchen. Like that was the solution because of a very, very simple problem. So now we know if we ever do a basement, take the 1 second to look at the pipe and make sure that there's holes in it. $12,000 later. So step 5 is evaluating the options. So, how can we go about fixing this problem? If there's more than one solution, what are the plus and minuses for each? We want to minimize risk, especially if this home is going to end up in someone else's hand. There's liability involved, and we want to make sure that we're taking, the most, the one with the biggest advantages. So we're separating the evaluation of options, and then we select an option or options. So what's the best one in balance, and is there a way to bundle a number of options together for a more satisfactory solution? So this is a big one, documenting the agreements, because if this is a problem that is at a fault of a contractor, then you kind of want there to be something in writing guaranteeing their work. So if this happens again, if the problem isn't, if the solution isn't a permanent fix, something as simple as writing up a contract, putting a warranty on it could make or break the whole thing. So writing everything down and then thinking through all the details and the implications. So developing an action plan. So we want to address the root cause and prevent problems from getting to others. Assign an owner and a timeline to each action, and status the actions to ensure completion. So that's follow up. Hey, maybe there's more than one contractor needed to involve to fix a problem. So it's kind of staying on top of everybody. It's one thing. So recently, my plumber didn't run his vents through. I have a roof deck, and they had to run through the parapet wall of the roof deck. The siding, the roof deck was already done. The siding was already done. He didn't run this vent, so now he has to rip down siding that was already completed and paid for, and he has to put holes in the fiberglass, which then needs to be patched. So what that looks like is okay, so now he has to do this thing, and I have to make sure that I follow up with my roofer right away to make sure that the penetrations get sealed and the siding goes back up. So just implementing that action plan and addressing the root cause. So completion and inspection. So if, let's say the problem has to do with a leak, then we do not want to consider this problem solved until it's guaranteed that it is fixed. So if my roof is leaking and the plumber has to wait, or the roofer has to wait till it's not raining to fix it, he comes, it's not raining, he said, I fixed it, it's gonna be $250. I'm okay, great, here's your $250. It rains again and the leak is back. So hopefully he's a good guy and he comes back even though he's already paid for. But something that we want to do going forward is just to make sure, so if it's contingent on it raining, or it's contingent on the water being on. If it's a leak, then we want to just make sure that we're actually verifying that that problem is solved. Quality assurance, how are they fixing the problem? If it's, people love spray foam and people love caulk. They want that to be the solution for everything. So I posted this really funny picture on Instagram the other day. I was walking around Brewery Town. I was looking at how other people had done their egress well for ideas on how to do mine. And I see these concrete steps, and it's stucco on the side, and the stucco is crumbling, and they literally use spray foam to fill in the concrete and just kind of patch, and put. It just blew my mind that was the best solution that they could come up with for that problem. And it's okay, so I don't think any of us will ever see something that crazy on any of our job sites, but it's all right, quality assurance. How did you fix this problem, and is it a long-term solution, or is this just gonna work until you get paid? What are you using? What are the materials involved? Does the work warrant a warranty? So most of the time, if it's a bigger issue, if we're looking at, anything with the subcontractors, it involves a warranty. You want to make sure, so I just sold that new construction home, and for the punch list that the buyers provided from their warranty, they had said that 2 of the windows don't lock. And I looked at it myself and I'm like, oh no, this is a framing problem. The window is literally, the opening for the window is too small and I can't fix it. So this is a project that the framers were there 10 months ago. And I called the framer and I said, can you get to this project? I'm selling it in 3 days. I need this to be fixed. And he showed up, right? So that's what you want to happen with anything across the board, whether it's your framers, your roofers, your plumbers. If something pops up, you want to make sure that they're there. And that's typically been the case for me. Working with new contractors, I always get a little uneasy, trust issues, so it's putting something in writing. Hey, do you have a 1-year warranty on this HVAC system? If something goes wrong, will you make sure within the 1 year at least that you'll come back and fix it? And that always goes for, as a seller, we close on a property and if their HVAC system stops working a week later, it's kind of our responsibility to make sure that that's fixed. So we want to make sure that the onus doesn't fall on us. So who is our HVAC contractor? Get them to warranty the work on our behalf. So it's shifting liability goes a long way. All right, so now we're gonna go to negotiation and cost control. So negotiation is a big one in this business. I know people who literally do not negotiate. And always negotiate. I have, this story always makes me laugh. So I was getting bids for framing for a new construction project. So I had the plans, I'm sending them to framers, and I always get 3 bids at least for every single trade. And so I send it out to three contractors. I get 1 quote for $22,000, 1 quote for $24,000, and then 1 for $36,000. So I go to the guy who gave me the quote for $36,000, and I'm like, you know what? I have quotes at around 22. I don't think that we can, that you're even close. And he's like, okay, 22. So this guy went from 36 to 22. And I had never worked with them, so that's testing the waters, right? It's sometimes. This is where networking is so important, and being in a room with all of these people who are going to be doing exactly what you're doing and using them as resources. So I have friends that refuse to use me as a resource, and they'll tell me, they're like, yeah, I ran into this issue, I just had to pay $800 for someone to install a downspout. And I'm like, you paid $800 for someone to install 1 downspout? That was the first price they gave you? Did you get any other quotes? No. Did you negotiate? No. And something like that, it's okay, you get a cheap downspout from Home Depot and you attach it and it takes a very short amount of time. So yeah, those are some examples of where negotiation works. But don't bargain yourself down before you get to the table. So 4 golden rules about cost control. So I said this a few times, and I'm going to continue to say it. It's super important to try to get 3 bids from each subcontractor. So I have a few subcontractors that I've been working with for years, and I have a really good relationship with. And sometimes I just kind of they give me a price, and I assume that it's market rate. But it's still always good to get that second opinion, because sometimes it's even if you have a good relationship with someone, they might assume that you're going to say yes regardless. So it's getting an idea of what the market rate is, and that's where that is good. The 3 bids is good for. So another thing which is super important, especially if you're new to working with a contractor, is never putting too much money out front. And you also want to think like a contractor, so everyone is has their own interests first. So it's like, hey, like, I've never worked for you before. I don't want to put out money for your job not knowing if you're going to pay me. And I'm like, well, I've never had you work for me. I don't want you to take my money and disappear. So it's kind of like, it's definitely a two-way street, and you have to come up with a happy median. So there's some projects, or there's some phases that literally don't cost money to get started. Like, labor does not cost money. So like, you don't need a deposit for labor. Not that it doesn't cost money, but you don't need a deposit for labor. So, if someone's coming to like clean out the job site, it's like, I'm not going to pay them up front if they're going to clean out the job site. It's like, if you're working a W-2 job, do you get prepaid for the work you're going to do? So that's one thing to consider. And also, so it's like, there is a huge trust-based factor. So if there's someone that you've never worked with, and it's like, a phase that needs a lot of money to be spent. So like, hey, I'm going to do your HVAC. I'm about to buy a $2,500 system. Of course, I need a deposit. If there's X amount of material that I need to buy, I need a deposit. So like, something in that situation could just be like getting a referral. Like, hey, is there other people that you've worked with before? And if they have nothing to hide, they'll say, no problem. And Philadelphia is such a small city that a lot of us share contractors anyway. So it's kind of like, word of mouth goes a long way. Returning extra material. So this is a big, big, big one for cost control. So for a few different phases of the project, for instance, like I use, we'll say like TAG lumber or Shelley's for, framing material, doors and trim. And I'll have them come out, and I'll have them measure the building for trim and doors. Sometimes I'll double check, but at this point I kind of trust their judgment. And they typically overcompensate. So after all the trim is installed, so right now I have a project that like I have a stack of extra baseboard and quarter round from the project. So if I'm in a rush, if I'm not paying attention, if I'm not managing my job site well, that could easily end up in the next dumpster that comes to clean out the project. But that's like a few $100s worth of material. So it's like calling Shelley's or calling TIG, whoever you're ordering from, and they almost always will just come and pick it up. Like, they've never said no to like returning material. And that goes for tile, that goes for flooring, if there's extra full boxes of flooring. And like, we have this scope of work, we have this budget, we know, hey, our flooring budget is $8,000, so when you go to buy it, you're trying to stay within $8,000. You're like, cool, all right, I'm staying on budget, and then you're making returns, and now all of a sudden you're below budget. So it does go a long way, and it does definitely add up throughout the project. Another thing that you could do is hiring a subcontractor for a labor rate and supplying the material. I haven't done this in a while, but there was a plumber that I would work with, and there'd be times where like he would go to this supply house and then just call me for payment. And like that, I didn't have to hand him money. I knew that he wasn't like, I knew what the materials were costing, and that could go for a lot of different trades. So here's some tips on how to negotiate. One thing is prepare in advance. So the information is power. Obtaining as much information as possible beforehand to make sure you understand the value of what you are negotiating. Few negotiations begin with the counterparts arrive at the table. So ask a friend, a colleague, networking, if you're not sure about pricing, or feedback from a subcontractor. Get a second opinion. Hey Nikki, this guy just gave me a price for $8,000. I know that you've worked with him before. Is that reasonable? So just like simple things like that. Everything is negotiable. So being honest and fair, what goes around comes around. So the goal in creating win-win outcomes is to have both counterparts feel that their needs and goals have been met, so that they will be willing to come back to the table and negotiate again. An atmosphere of trust reduces the time required to create a win-win outcome. So one thing that, my dad has been an entrepreneur his whole life, and he kind of like embedded like moral business tactics into my brain at a young age. And like one thing that he would always say is that like when you're doing business with somebody, it's like you are building together. So like if you hire if you hire a roofer, it's like, okay, so you are both two businesses that are working together, and if I'm trying to like, you want their success is contingent on your success, and vice versa. So considering that, it's like I want to respect that, and also not try to be so cheap that these people end up becoming, they might become resentful on the job site. I've seen this a ton of times. And they might, their loyalty, goes down, and it's like, oh man, I'm not gonna come back and fix that, I didn't even make any money on this project, like you don't want that attitude on your project. So it's like making sure that we're willing to pay market rate. It's like we're not out here to get the cheapest of the cheap, because that directs in a very specific outcome, Cheap is not quality. There's that saying, it's like you can get fast, you can get cheap, or you can get quality. You can't have all three. So never accept the first offer. So the other party will make an offer that he or she thinks you might refuse, just to see how firm you are on key issues. So like that story of like the framer who wanted $36,000. He was just testing the waters. I could have said yes, and then if I didn't know better. So chances are, if you don't have to fight a little for what you want, you won't get the best deal. So using the power of competition. Someone who thinks it's necessary to compete for your business may be willing to give away more than he or she originally intended. Sometimes just the threat of competition is enough to encourage concessions. So I always let everybody know that I'm getting a few different bids. So I ended up hiring a plumber to, handle this private sewer issue that I'm having. And I really wanted to use this one plumber. I had 3 bids. 2 of them came in lower than him. And I said, hey, listen, I have these 2 other bids at this price, but I really want to work with you. And he said, okay, I can do it for that price. Because you're not going to lose a job over, $500 if it's, if it's that big. So also being willing to walk away, and don't ask for the impossible. This is just common sense. Don't be rude. Your chances of being successful will go up if you're gracious and polite, especially for women. There's not many places where we get to shine in this business, so our charm can come in handy with negotiations. Being willing to enter a deal, being able to walk away, and being perceived to do both. So this is a big one, not showing you are in a rush. So sometimes when we have a problem that needs to be solved yesterday, or we maybe have slacked in our time management, project management, and we're like, oh my gosh, this needs to be done right away. It's urgency costs money, and that's what I find in this business. And if I show, you can just think about it from a business standpoint. So if someone comes to you and they're like, I need this thing done right away, it's super important, and you're like, okay, so doesn't sound like you have time to get other bids. Doesn't sound like you have time to shop around, and that's an opportunity to be like, okay, I can get there tomorrow for X amount of dollars, and that's just always something to consider. It's not to sound too urgent when you're negotiating. So this is a Nikki classic. Don't trip over dollars to pick up pennies. So things to consider. Is this an ongoing relationship? So there's subcontractors that I've been using for years. I trust them. I'm not going to sacrifice our relationship because, they want to charge me a few $100s for something small. And I'm like, their time is money as well. I'm not going to sacrifice this relationship over, a few bucks. So you have to know if you're negotiating something as part of a single transaction or an ongoing relationship where the day after matters. So not all negotiations are a zero-sum game that ends at the moment hands are shaken. Sometimes you need to make long-term gains at the expense of short-term sacrifices, because there is a day after in which you and those who you negotiated with must work together. So this thought has me on the other side a lot. So it's like, okay, to think of the contractor. It's like, so if it's a new relationship, they may be willing to give you a discount if they know that there's going to be a lot more work. So, hey, like, I've never worked with you before. I'm in a bind. You know, my budget's only this. You know, going forward, I'll make sure I budget a little bit better. But I really want to work with you. And, you know, typically they'll be willing to, you know, negotiate on that price, knowing that they're going to have, you know, a steady work after that. All right, so good old quality management. How are we feeling? Doing good. I see everyone's eyes open, which is great. There's coffee if we need it. So quality means doing the right thing when no one is looking. So I don't know how much of you like, I don't read the news too much, but I definitely see those articles pop up that, you know, target the bad real estate investors and the bad developers and the bad builders. So this is something that goes a long way. It's just making sure that, you know, the work that we do and the homes that we provide are done with quality in mind. And it's not like, okay, like get in, get out, make our money, and have someone else deal with all the problems. So one way to do that is to verify that the work is being done to code. Wow, I don't know the building code. How do I do that? So, how do I know? So don't skip pulling permits. This is, you know, at this point in time, it's almost impossible in Philly to get through a project without a permit. You know, that time has come and gone. You know, at this point, they have so many people in the field and so many angry neighbors that they're gonna call right away. So this is a big one because you're pulling permits, you know the type of work that needs to get done. Your inspector is going to be able to, you know, guide you in what is code and what isn't. And there's just so much to learn when you do that. So with that being said, you want to meet every single inspector on site. So typically for us, there's two different types of inspectors. If we're using construction funding of any sort and we're getting draws, there's a draw inspector. So they're coming out every time we need money. So we want to go on, like, be on site with them, walk through, ask questions, hear what they have to say. They know a lot about construction, typically. And same with the building inspectors. So I learned so much just by showing up to the building inspections, because they like to talk, and you'll walk through the project and they'll be like, oh, like this, you know, they'll point out like the plumbing fixtures and the way how like, oh, this is supposed to be this way, make sure you do that going forward. And with the installation, everything's very specific, and there's just so much to learn, you know, just by showing up for your building inspections. And ask questions. So this is a good opportunity, you know, to have someone who is familiar with the Philadelphia Building Code or the code wherever you're located, and to be able to show up and like get the answers to the questions that you have. So that way, when you're on the job site with your contractors, you can kind of have the knowledge that the inspector is going to be looking for already. Leveraging mentors, consultants, friends, colleagues, people who have been in the same situation. There's a ton of us doing the exact same thing. If you have a concern or a question about how something was done, typically it's very easy to just ask someone who's already done it before for their feedback, and you can get the answer that you're looking for. Hiring experienced licensed subcontractors. So this is a big one because there's a lot of penny pinching, and you know, people are like cutting corners with hiring licensed subcontractors. So I've witnessed people literally pay a fee for a licensed contractor to pull the permit and then have unlicensed people do the work. And you might as well just be hiring people off the street yourself, you know. So that's a big one, and making sure One thing that always sticks out to me is like, so when you're at Home Depot and someone like sees that you're, a GC or something, they're like, oh, I do everything. Here's my card. I do everything except electric. Like those are the people that like you want to stay away from because they don't specialize in anything. The people who are like the handyman, they're like, oh, I can do whatever you need. It's like they typically don't know the code. They don't know the ins and outs of the construction. So if they're like, yeah, I can do masonry, I can do plumbing, like you can't be like good at all the things. So if you need masonry done, hire a mason. If you need plumbing done, hire a plumber. So thinking like a homeowner and paying attention to detail. So this goes a long way in like perspective and being on the job site and saying like, if this was my home, and just like really quick, just shifting that perspective of like, okay, would I be okay with this? Because sometimes it's like in and out, and it's like, pointing out little things of being like, if this was my home, would I like that? And paying attention to the details. So the devil is in the details. So a few different things that are super, super important to pay attention to details throughout the project. So one is waterproofing. This is probably the most important part of the entire project because this is the one that will come back and haunt you and destroy your house from the inside out. And like we see it all the time with bashing bad contractors online. So it's really not that hard to make sure that this is done properly. So waterproofing is typically, it's the roofer, it's the person installing the windows, and it's, regarding your basement. So those are the three areas that you want to make sure are getting done correctly. So one thing I do is, when the roof is done, it's typically pretty early in the project, and I will do walkthroughs when it's raining, before the walls are closed up, when you can literally see directly where water penetration is coming in, and that is the perfect time to identify if there's any gaps, if there's any holes, if there's any sources of water coming in, because at that point, the walls aren't closed up, you're not ripping out drywall, you're not figuring out if it's the roof, if it's plumbing, if it's the window. It's like, okay, I can see water, we need to fix that. Same thing for windows. Windows can be a big problem with waterproofing because typically just caulking and silicone. I've had that problem a lot. So the second one comes in with framing. So this is something that like is super simple. It's something that we check, early in the project, but if it is not verified early in the project, it will come back to haunt us later in the project. So like as framers, their biggest job is to make sure that things are square level plumb. Because if not, nothing works. Like we can't install doors properly, we can't install windows properly, the floors aren't level. It's like, and then at that point, it's too late to fix. During framing, it's like, checking to see if things are level, if things are square, if things are plumb. And that goes a long way with like windows fitting perfectly and the like. So the location of mechanicals and rough-ins. So I talked about this a little bit before. So one of the biggest things that I've learned to do in this business that has helped me dramatically is when mechanicals are done, just take pictures of the walls, and it will save you ends up being such a big deal at the end of the project because drywall companies have hired all different levels of quality of drywall companies. They will always cover up something, whether it's a washer box or a light switch or a light or a vent, something will get covered. And unless you want the drywall completely ripped up by another subcontractor, it is really good to just know where everything is. Another thing is in trim work. So this is where, details really matter. So like we can just pay attention to like, okay, is everything caulked? Is the trim, set right? Sometimes if a door is too close to a wall, then we can't put casing all around the door. And then we come into this situation where there's like door casing on two sides of the door, which, you know, when it comes to details, isn't super professional. So corners is another one. So just like paying attention to like literal corners. And if we're doing exposed brick, that's where it really matters, because you can see, like, this is a good example. I don't know if you guys can see, like, in this corner specifically, like, between the brick and the drywall. Like, if we were selling a home and that were there, like, that would not be okay. So that's just, like, one example. On this side, they did okay. They added, like, some trim. But that corner could probably have a whole animal family come through. And paint, you know, like that's like the finishing touches of the project. Like you work so hard throughout the entire project. If you have a sloppy paint job, then it makes the whole project, you know, and all the hard work and the details thus far, you know, it makes it look like it was kind of for nothing. So making sure that, like, you know, the painters aren't spraying doorknobs and like that they're cutting in, that they're, you know, there's no like spray marks. Paint's a pretty easy trade, so it's not too much to ask to have a professional paint job. So punch lists. So this is where we take our project from like 80% quality to like 100% quality. So every single contractor that you hire is likely not gonna, you know, complete their job 100% to your liking. So every phase has punch lists. So for instance, after someone comes through, they do their whole project, you walk through and you go through every single room. And it's like, okay, and I just kind of like look around and verify, see if there's anything that's like out of place, something needs to be moved. And it's like, so for plumbing, for example, I just created a punch list for a finished plumber at one of my projects. And it's like, okay, so this hot water heater doesn't have a pressure relief valve. You know, this fixture is loose. And like, just kind of like paying attention to all the details, making sure that they're 100%, creating lists and then providing it to each and every subcontractor. So like sloppiness, catching it early goes a long way, you know, like for instance, paint, you know, like for them to have to paint an entire house twice, it would just be good to like come in and be like making sure that they're prepping properly, that they look professional, you know, having the idea that they're going to do a good job from the beginning. So catching it early. So material selections, this is in terms of details as well. So when do we use builder grades and when not to? So an example of that would be if we are doing like a B or C grade rental, builder grade is great. You know, like if we're doing Section 8 or the like, you know, builder grade at Home Depot, it's kind of as cheap as you can get. And it's like, you know, not very trendy. You're not worrying about like making a really beautiful custom home. It's just kind of like providing the product. So when not to, it's like custom fixtures. So you know, if we want to sell a house at the top of the market, we want to look at the other houses that are selling at the top of the market and what kind of light fixtures are they using, what kind of tile are they using, like all of the details of the finishes and the fixtures, and making sure that we're at the level that we need to be. Not taking shortcuts. So we want to solve problems early. So be on the lookout for problems before they surface. So, you know, a big one here is those punch lists and before the walls get closed up, because that is like the biggest turning point of the project. It's like, okay, the plumbing's done, the electrical's done, the HVAC's done, everything's done, and we're about to just hide it all. You know, so like whatever problems might come up, we're not going to be able to see them. So like that point right before drywall, making sure that like everything is as good as it can be. Because, you know, if we're just worried about speed, like so often it was like, you know, the partner that I had for a short period of time, they would like, they like wouldn't do walkthroughs, and they would like kind of manage from afar and be like, okay, installation's done, call the drywall, and then like a few weeks later the water's on and there's 17 leaks in the house that could have been identified if something as simple as like turning the water on before drywall, and things like that. So I think this is the last one. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about leadership skills. So in terms of leadership, so we have now officially gone over all of the project management skills that we need to be successful going forward in our investment properties and the projects. So that being a good project manager is very task oriented. So we talked about how we can be organized, how we can negotiate, how we can communicate, and of the like. And now we get to talk about the leadership skills, which ties directly into like our personality, our behaviors, the way we think and the way we respond to things. So someone can be a good project manager and not have any leadership skills. And someone can have really good leadership skills but not know anything about construction project management, and they're going to be useless on the job site. Like they can motivate and they can make sure that they're leading the team, but to not know the ins and outs of the project, it's not going to serve us any well. So what we want to do is we want to be that perfect cohesion of having the project management skills and the leadership skills to be able to project manage efficiently. So successful project managers develop project management skills through knowledge of the standard project management framework and through experience in utilizing best practices in the methodologies, which that's really what we're going to be focusing on in this class, is like all the things we need to know that are task oriented typically in terms of managing our project well. Leadership, so a successful leader is innovative and creative and continuously developing new skills that will integrate with their current capabilities. So effective leaders integrate their leadership skills with project management skills, developing new leadership skills to complement their project management skills. Does everyone kind of get where I'm going with that? So leadership. So let your purpose be a part of who you are as a leader. So what is your why? And what is our primary purpose? And make sure this is driving all of our decisions. So, we all want to invest in real estate or are investing in real estate. We maybe want to get better at managing these projects, are interested in the excitement of construction, and maybe want to be a little bit more involved in the project management. And we need to keep in mind what our why is. So typically, a lot of us as investors, what is our why? It's like, okay, financial freedom. Okay, generational wealth. And whatever your purpose is for wanting to invest in real estate, then that's what you want to keep in mind, because that's going to be your driving force, especially when things get hard. So I used to always think it's like when I left my full-time job to invest in real estate, I knew that it wasn't going to be easy, but I would think about it in the sense of when I have a hard day at this job that I hate, that level of hard feels excruciating, because there's no driving force or purpose behind that. So when I have a hard day in real estate, it's that level of hard isn't even comparable to the level of hard in a job that I am not passionate about and that doesn't serve my purpose of my why. Sometimes, we get caught up in the hustle and the bustle of real estate investing, and we at first it's super exciting, and we're really passionate about it, and then we start coming across the stresses of it, and we can kind of lose track of our why a little bit. So it's always good to keep that at the forefront, because when it comes to those quick problem solving skills and being solution oriented, tying back to our why and why are we even doing this is going to be a game changer. So keeping that end goal always in sight, these are typically, I always try to remind myself when I am getting stressed out that I'm like, wow, this is a very privileged problem to have, you know? So like, as stressful and sometimes as expensive as solving a problem might be, like, it's hard to, or it can be difficult to, you know, forget where I came from, right? Because we always are like, it's all relative. So my dream was to invest in real estate, and it felt a little bit untangible for a long time. Now I'm investing in real estate, and I just forgot that it was hard to get here. And now it's like, okay, all my problems are like what they are right now, and like I lose track of that. So simply saying like this is a very privileged problem to have, and I'm grateful to have it, can go a long way. So optimism, if genuine, if forced, fake it till you make it. You know, grit your teeth while you're saying it. You're like, I love this problem. You know, like it can liven up the workplace. It can avoid reckless and thoughtless actions. You know, we talked earlier about like that panic mode when there's a problem and how it doesn't serve us to be in that space. So although there is an expectation for project managers to be leaders, project management and leadership are two very different things. So just to like continue to wrap our heads around what the difference is. So like leaders, you know, they innovate while managers administer. So, you know, these can kind of like tie in together if we're going to be both. So we can be innovative about an idea, and then we can administer it efficiently. We can seek challenges and find ways how we can grow as investors, as project managers, but also maintain the status quo. So think long term. So, you know, tying back to like as leaders, what is our driving purpose? Like what is our why? And you know, being able to be an efficient manager and to control the things that will get us there. So as leaders, we are always we want to worry about doing the right thing. So this shows up a lot. Did anyone see? Me and Nicole were just talking about this earlier this morning. The article on like Streamline, and this is like not like it's not a super uncommon article to see about big developers, but all they talked about was how poor the quality the construction was and how it's affecting these new homeowners who like had these dreams and worked so hard to buy a property, and now they're rotting from the inside out because of poor project management. And you know, me and Nicole were talking about how our personalities show up in our business, you know, and like our egos can show up in the way we conduct and care for the things that we do. So that, you know, worrying about doing the right thing. So like, that's again like thinking long term, thinking about our why. You know, we are here, you know, in a very small city, and we're making a huge difference in our personal financial lives and in our community. And to tie in, making sure that we're doing the right thing and providing a quality product. As a manager, it's like worrying about doing things right. So it's like tying in the two. So like being task oriented and making sure all the tasks get, you know, done properly. And then, you know, making sure that, you know, our mission is doing the right thing as well. So leaders have a wide circle of influence. So, you know, I feel like, you know, networking, I'm going to continue to bring this up. Networking is just like one of the most important things in business. And networking itself is kind of an act of humility, right? So like, I don't know it all. I don't know, you know, I don't always have the right answers. And I know the importance of having other people who have different experiences and different resources involved in my circle as well. So, you know, leaders understand that. So like, we're innovative, we're using networking, we're connecting, and you know, we're using a wide circle of influence. And managers are like, as important as it is to be task oriented, it's like task, 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 task. I might know the right way. I'm not going to seek outside, you know? So like kind of combining those things. We know the right task, but we also know when it is important to reach out to other people and to ask for help. Networking. So I will forever credit my, like, everything I've accomplished in the last 4 years for my network. So Nicole talked about it a little bit before, but like my journey includes I was a realtor for a short period of time. I did some wholesaling throughout. I was a contractor for a big developer, and all of these things landed in my lap. And typically all of the properties that I buy today land in my lap because of the people that I know and relationships that I started years ago. So for a long time, I didn't have the intention on ever GCing for anybody else. So I got my GC license so that I could pull my own permits and I could manage my own job site. And a developer in the neighborhood got in a bind and they sat me down and they were like, hey, like we really, we know the type of work that you do and we really need your help. So with zero marketing, I was able to pick up, it was like $1.5 million in contracts to this person. And, building a name for yourself, letting everyone you come across know what you do. Like, hey, I invest in real estate. This is what I look for. This is what I do. And then when people come across those deals that match your criteria, they're going to hit you up and they're going to know that like you're the person for them. And once you close a deal with this person, so I've bought 4 different properties from the same person. And now today they know that I'm buying in this neighborhood. They know if the price is right, I will close. And it's like, okay, I'm going to contact Julia. And I have faith that she will close the deal. And it's like building relationships. And it carries out through the whole, our whole business, right? So like being in Better Than Success alone, or like being here in this room surrounded by so many people that are in real estate, that are doing what we want to do, they will be resources for you. Like if you have a question like, hey, I need a lawyer, like you ask 5 people in this room, you're going to end up with a dozen contacts of like real estate lawyers. And that's just how it goes. So these are some of the things, like the talking points of networking. So the advantages of just like word of mouth. So, now at this point, you guys all know my name, you guys all know what I do, and like in conversations, it's kind of like the way, like the more people you know, the more business, the more your business comes up in conversations. Mentorship. So, mentorship is a big one. It's like the more, like as you network, you might find people that are doing what you want to do, and you may be able to use them as a mentor. You can figure out how a relationship might look between the two of you, and also being able to access these people's networks too. So like I know a few people, like in this room alone, like people that have some experience that maybe I don't. So like I can reach out to you and you can help me with something that I don't have the answer to. Another one is finding suppliers. So you could come up to me after the meeting and be like, oh, like who do you use for your lumber? And I can be like, okay, well I've used Shelley's, I've used Taig. I can introduce you to my sales rep at these places, and like that just can go across the board for contractors, for suppliers, getting references, knowing how much things cost. Off-market opportunities. So again, it's like if people know that you're buying, then they're going to contact you when they have something to sell. And the more people you know, and it's like the same thing, the more opportunities that come up. Networking with wholesalers. If you hear someone, hey, I wholesale, introduce yourself saying this is where I buy, and that's one more person like in your pool of people that are going to reach out to you. Another thing is getting new ideas and innovations, inspiration and motivation as well. So like those two kind of tie into each other. But what are other people doing differently than you? So, we always kind of want to, stand out a little bit or see, what the current trends are. So like networking with the people in the neighborhood that are also investing, that are also rehabbing, realtors and the like. It's like kind of knowing, what the standard is for, design and like getting creative within the project. So it simply improves your communication. I remember I did like a speed dating networking thing. Have you guys ever done one of those? Yeah, it's super awkward, right? It can be, and doing things that like challenge yourself. So like for some people, it doesn't come naturally to walk up to a stranger and introduce yourself. I'm definitely one of those people. Like outside, I can like act like an extrovert, and inside, I'm just like, you know. And so it's just like I've been able to improve my communication with other people just by networking, going out for coffee with someone that I don't know, doing a speed networking event where it's like, okay, I have to sit there and I talk to a stranger and like talk about what I do and who I am, and it's definitely a huge opportunity to improve, your personal communication skills too. Networking is the foundation of relationship. It's like the more people that you access. So at this point, a lot of people know that I may be selling homes in Brewerytown, and I make sure that a lot of the local realtors know I'm selling a home in Brewerytown, and that might provide the opportunity for me to pre-sell it. So they might have someone, hey, I have someone looking to buy a home in Brewerytown, and they think to contact me. All right, how are we doing for lunch? It's almost noon, Nikki. Are we hungry? I heard a lot of
Up to you. After you teach.
We started a little late. How about we get through the next topic, become a licensed contractor? Yeah, we're all good with that? Okay. So, becoming a licensed general contractor. It is not the beauty of a building you should look at, it's the construction of the foundation that will stand the test of time. So, a contractor's license is required of any contractor who performs work which the contractor is paid $500 or more. So, I want to first say that you do not need to be a licensed general contractor to be able to manage your project well. So project management, like a lot of the things that we're learning in this class, is very imperative to being a good investor, to being a good project manager, and that does not mean that you necessarily have to hold the contractor license. That was something that I decided to do, and I'm going to go over the pros and the cons of having that license. So if that is something that you want to do, that you have the resources and direction from this class to do that as well. So to become a GC, there's just a few very simple tasks. Unfortunately, you don't have to have any experience in construction at all. You don't have to know what you're doing. All you have to do is set up an LLC first. So if you want to take a picture of this might be, yeah. Well, good. Nope. I'll wait till the phones go down. Yeah. All right, I see one more phone. You good? Got it? Okay. So we are not attorneys. I'm just going to throw that out there. That's our disclaimer. This is not legal advice, but these are the simple things that you need to do to, on your own, set up an LLC. So you'd first go to the irs.gov. It is really simple. Nikki sets it up. She explained to me, I've always hired a lawyer, but she explained to me that it is super simple to just do it your own. Go online. It takes 10 to 15 minutes. You go to the irs.gov. You get your EIN number. They provide you your EIN form right away. You do need an operating agreement, typically to open up a bank account, or if you purchase a home, they're going to ask for that. So you can either seek an attorney for that, or I'm sure there's ways to get templates or use your network. And then after that, you would need to submit the state LLC application. So it's two different websites. You start with irs.gov, and then you go to corporations.pa.gov, and you do the limited liability corporation paperwork. Does everyone have a picture of that who needs it? Okay. So that's first, set up your LLC. So now as per the city of Philadelphia, I'm not sure how other cities work. I feel like it would be the same, but it is required to have your OSHA 30 certificate, which means that it's 30 hours of OSHA class time. So it's a safety training course. So you need to provide to the city proof of completion of your OSHA 30 or equivalent certified by the department within 5 years of the application date. It must be submitted for each named supervisor. The supervisor may not be currently employed by another licensed contractor. So that is just something that's provided through the city. You have to have the supervisor of the company, which would be you if you take it. So the following programs have been approved by the Department of L&I as equivalent to OSHA 30. The courses have been determined to provide the minimum number of course hours equivalent to OSHA training, address mandatory OSHA topics directly related to job site hazards, and or provide a benefit that exceeds that of OSHA or is unique to a particular sector of the construction industry. So that's the course that they make you take. You can do the course in person or online. I personally did mine online. There's different sections. You have to take quizzes and then you take a test at the end. And the most important thing is that you have the 30 hours worth of class time and pass the test. So here are a bunch of authorized training programs that you can take. I think I did the top one, Advanced Online. There's just a small fee for it. I think it was like $120 or something of the like. So to get your license, there's an application fee. This is for the city of Philadelphia of $20, which is applied towards the license of $100. So every year you have to renew your license. It's another $100. All of the information, step-by-step specifics of getting your license through the city of Philadelphia is located on this website, business.phila.gov/contractor-license. So when you're ready to go downtown, who's been to L&I? Who loves L&I? Oh, yeah. You're special. So we all know the importance of like preparing as best as we can, because we're like all week we're like, ugh, gotta go to L&I, gotta go to L&I. You're like trying to get yourself mentally ready, and like the worst is when you get down there and they like turn you down and make you come back after waiting for 3 hours. So I always like to make a list of everything I know I need, because a lot of times when people want to get their license, they're always missing something and they have to come back. I think I made a list of everything, but for the license specifically, going back and having everything on that checklist that's on the application. So there's pros and cons to both having your GC license and not. So the biggest pro is like being able to pull your own permits. I like the control aspects. I get to control cost. I'm negotiating with the subcontractors. I'm paying for material. I can control the timeline and the quality management, and I get to make all the decisions. So what that might look like is if you hire a GC and they're behind schedule and they're like, oh, I'm waiting on my installation guy, and like weeks go by and you're like, what's up with your installation guy? Can I have his number? And like at some points it feels like you're GCing your GC, right? So like you're kind of like, you could easily step in his shoes and maybe be a little bit more organized or be a little bit more, task oriented, because timeline may not be as important to them. Of course, like some people, like their money is contingent on how fast they do the job, but also like they're not considering that our job site is costing money the longer it sits. So another big one is like being able to keep track to the T of like the accounting and having financial reports of everything, and being able to refer back to old projects. So like typically when I make a budget for or do the scope of work for a new project, I'm referring back to projects that I've already completed. And like I take into consideration that like costs might be going up a little bit, the size of the building is different. But I know like, hey, if this new construction project cost me $22,000 to have the framing labor, then this project's a little bit smaller. I can say that it's going to cost me about like 20 to 21, and I can like literally know, as close to possible what things are going to be costing. Also like inspector relations. So, my inspector, they know if a permit says brick house, they're dealing with me, and like I have a good relationship with my inspectors. I can call them or text them on a personal level and like ask them questions about, something that's concerning me on my job site. I know plumbing code changed recently, October 1st. There was a lot of major plumbing code changes in the city. So my plumber had come through, my basement wall with PVC, and I'd never seen that before. So I took a picture of it and I sent it to my inspector. I said, is this okay? And he ended up coming out and checking it out for me and saying that it was fine. So something that simple of like making sure things are done right and having the relationships firsthand rather than expecting someone else to have the relationships. So being able to handle violations or any licensing issues right away. So that's like being, we are typically solution oriented. So if there's a violation on the building or there's some kind of issue with the license, we get a violation for some of the work that's being done. It's in our hands. It's like we're not handing over the baton to someone else to fix that. It's like we can head right downtown that day, the next day, like we have the control over fixing some of those problems. So some of the cons of having a GC license, we have to pay for insurance. I have to pay for general liability insurance for the general contracting company, which ends up, it is expensive. I end up paying a few $1,000s for my insurance, but the money saved. Because if I was hiring a general contractor, they'd be paying that insurance and they'd be passing on the fee to me. So it is still money saved. So the license fees, like we talked about, you have to pay for your OSHA 30 class, you gotta pay for your license every year, which like those fees are minimal, but it's still something that you have to consider. The administrative work that's involved, so, as much as the financial reports and all that is like such a huge advantage, it does require us to sit down and do that administrative work and keep track of the finances and keep track of everything. And also like it has us hold the liability. I think that's probably like the biggest con. So from there, we need to make sure in order to become a licensed general contractor that we have the proper insurances.
Question regarding the permits.
Mm-hmm.
What permits can the GC pull versus you need the subcontractors to pull?
So typically, the subcontractors that need to pull their own permits are the plumber and the electrician,
Okay.
and the sprinkler if you have a sprinkler company, and any like outside work. But the GC can pull. I can even pull HVAC permits.
Alteration?
Yep, alteration permits, demo permits. Typically anything otherwise that's not mechanical. So we have to provide our proof of insurance, which looks like, so we need a workman's compensation and employer's liability. So this is basically what the city of Philadelphia looks for. So there is a way around getting workers' compensation. If you don't have any employees, then you don't need workers' comp. So the way my general construction company is set up is I'm the licensed general contractor and I hire licensed subcontractors. I do not have any employees. I don't have anybody working on a day-to-day. It's just like everything is subcontracted out, so I don't need workers' comp. So the city of Philadelphia requires you to provide a written letter saying, I do not have any employees, and then have it notarized, and then submit that with your application, and that substitutes your need for workers' comp. But for the employee's liability, these numbers are very specific, and if they're not, if they don't match these, they will deny your application, and you'll have to go back to your insurance company and get it changed. So the liability includes $100,000 for each accident, $100,000 for each employee, and a $500,000 policy limit. It also includes $500,000 per occurrence, and you also need to provide automobile liability insurance with a minimum limit of $300,000. So this is something that, like, if you print it out, you'll see it might say that yours is only $100,000. So then you have to call your company and have the limits raised because they are very specific in that, and they won't accept your application if it doesn't match.
So then that question right here, if it's above the number, they still won't accept it, so let's say it's $1 million.
Yeah, if it's above, it's fine. Yep. So for the application, and every year when we renew our application, all insurance must be submitted on a certificate of liability insurance. So you have to specify that with your insurance company, because they might send you the declaration page, or they may send you something else. Then you take that downtown, and then the city is like, no, we need this specifically. So that's another thing on the list that definitely needs to be specific. All right, so I think we should stop there. And then after lunch, we're gonna have someone come in and talk specifically on insurances. Real sexy stuff.
So, reason I had this guy come in, because I had my GC license, and even Julia, who's like killing me, it's like a mystery, like, you just tell them what you need and you pay for it, but the last time I had to have a conversation, he asked me a bunch of questions that, like, before I got my insurance, there are all these different questions that they need to know the answers to, but you don't know what types of projects and the size of the project that you want to work on. So you just say, hey, give me the minimum. But then once I started like really getting busy, I realized I was underinsured. And so, he's gonna come, he'll be here, in a little bit, probably by the time we're done here. He's gonna talk about the insurance and like how you should make sure that you are properly insured and all that good stuff. Is that fair? Okay. Awesome. So, the guard walks in, just listen to this guy.